Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, Part 6, in which all our protagonists find the thin veneer of tranquility in their lives, tested by family and friends, with farcical and tragic consequences. Chapter 32. Before Vronsky left for the elections, Anna, considering that the scenes repeated each time he left might only make him colder and not bind him to her, decided to try as hard as she could to calmly endure her separation from him. But the cold, stern look he gave her when he came to announce that he was leaving offended her, and even before he left, her calm was already broken. Later, when she was alone, she thought about that look, which expressed his right to freedom, and arrived, as always, at one thing: the awareness of her humiliation. He has the right to go off wherever and whenever he wants, not only to go off, but to abandon me. He has all the rights, and I have none. But knowing that, he shouldn't have done it. And yet what did he do? He looked at me with a cold, stern expression. Of course, that is indefinable, intangible, but it wasn't so before. And that look means a lot, she thought. That look shows that the cooling off has begun. And though she was convinced that the cooling off had begun, still there was nothing she could do. She could not change anything in her relations with him. Just as before, she could only try to keep him by her love and her attractiveness, and as before, by being occupied during the day and taking morphine at night, she could stifle the terrible thoughts of what would happen if he stopped loving her. True, there was one other means, not to keep him, for that she wanted something but his love, but to get so close to him, to be in such a position that he could not abandon her. That means was divorce and marriage, and she began to wish for it, and decided to agree to it the very first time he or Stevia brought it up. In such thought she spent 5 days without him, those days when he intended to be away. Walks, conversations with Princess Varvara, visits to the hospital, and above all, reading one book after another, occupied her time. But on the 6th day, when the coachman came back without him, she felt that she was no longer possessed of the strength to stifle her thoughts of him and of what he was doing there. Just then her daughter became sick. Anna began to look after her, but that did not distract her either, particularly as the sickness was not dangerous. Much as she tried, she could not love this girl, nor could she pretend to love her. Towards evening of that day, left alone, Anna felt such fear about him that she almost decided to go to town, but thinking better of it, wrote that contradictory letter which Vronsky received, and, without rereading it, sent it with a messenger. The next morning she received his letter and regretted her own. She anticipated with horror the repetition of that stern look he had cast at her as he was leaving, especially when he discovered that the girl was not dangerously sick. But all the same, she was glad she had written to him. Anna now admitted to herself that he was burdened by her, that he would regret parting with his freedom and coming back to her, but in spite of that, she was glad of his coming. Let him be burdened, but let him be there with her, so that she could see him and know his every move. She was sitting in the drawing-room under a lamp with a new book by Taine, reading and listening to the noise of the wind outside. and expecting the carriage to arrive any moment. Several times she thought she heard the sound of wheels, but was mistaken. At last she heard not only the sound of wheels, but the driver's shouts and the hollow sound under the portico. Even Princess Varvara, who was playing patience, confirmed it, and Anna, flushing, got up, but instead of going downstairs, as she had already done twice, she stopped. She suddenly felt ashamed of her lie, but frightened most of all at how he was going to greet her. The offended feeling was gone now. She only feared he would show his displeasure. She remembered that their daughter had already been well for 2 days. She was even vexed that she had recovered just as the letter was sent. Then she remembered him, that he was there, all of him, with his hands, his eyes. She heard his voice, and forgetting everything, she joyfully ran to meet him. "Well, how's Annie?" he said timidly from below, looking at Anna running down to him. He was sitting in a chair, and the footman was pulling off one of his warm boots. "All right, she's better." "And you?" he said, giving himself a shake. She took his hand in both of hers and drew it to her waist, not taking her eyes off him. "Well, I'm very glad," he said, coldly looking at her. Her hair, the dress he knew she had put on for him. He liked it all, but he had already liked it so many times, and the stony, stern expression she had been so afraid of settled on his face. "Well, I'm very glad. And are you well?" he said, wiping his wet beard with a handkerchief and kissing her hand. "It makes no difference," she thought, "as long as he's here. And when he's here he daren't not love me." The evening passed happily and cheerfully in the presence of Princess Varvara, who complained to him that without him Anna took morphine. "What was I to do? I couldn't sleep. My thoughts troubled me. When he's here I never take it. Almost never." He told her about the elections, and Anna, with her questions, was able to guide him to the very thing that cheered him, his success. She told him about everything that interested him at home, and all her news was most cheerful. But late at night, when they were alone, Anna, seeing that she was again in full possession of him, wished to wipe away the painful impression of that look owing to the letter. She said, "But confess, you were vexed to get the letter and didn't believe me." As soon as she said it, she realized that however amorously disposed he was towards her now, he had not forgiven her for it. "Yes," he said, "the letter was so strange. First Annie's sick, and then you want to come yourself." "It was all true." "I don't doubt that." "Yes, you do. You're displeased, I can see." "Not for 1 minute. I'm only displeased. It's true that you seem not to want to admit there are responsibilities." "Responsibilities to go to a concert?" "Let's not talk about it," he said. "And why not talk about it?" she said. "I merely wish to say the business may come up. Something necessary. Now you see I'll have to go to Moscow to do with the house. Ah, Anna, why are you so irritable? Don't you know I can't live without you?" "If so," said Anna in a suddenly changed voice, "then this life is a burden to you. Yes, you'll come for a day and then go, as men do." "Anna, that's cruel. I'm ready to give my whole life." But she was not listening to him. "If you go to Moscow, I'll go too. I won't stay here. Either we separate or we live together." "You know that is my only wish, but for that—" "A divorce is necessary. I'll write to him. I see that I can't live like this. But I will go with you to Moscow." "It's as if you're threatening me. Yet there's nothing I wish more than not to be separated from you," Vronsky said, smiling. But the look that flashed in his eyes as he spoke those tender words was not only the cold, angry look of a persecuted and embittered man. She saw that look and correctly guessed its meaning. "If it is like this, it is a disaster," said the look. It was a momentary impression, but she never forgot it. Anna wrote a letter to her husband asking him for a divorce, and at the end of November, having parted with Princess Varvara, who had to go to Petersburg, she moved to Moscow with Vronsky, expecting a reply from Alexey Alexandrovitch any day, to be followed by a divorce. They now settled together like a married couple. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.